Out of Humanities 2, Shasta College. How you all doing out there? It's not too hot. I mean, it's low triple digits for the next 10 days, but we're used to it here in the Northland. Just waiting for the fires. I heard there's one in Anderson. One of my students lives down there and had to abandon her house. So be careful. It's fire season. So, and she reminds me that those of you who are going to be late, I'm going to give 2 extra days on the due date. I'll post it on Canvas. It'll still be late. And this time, not 3 points off, 5 points off, because by now you shouldn't be late. Um, and then next week, it'll be 6 points off. So you want to make sure you get your papers in. But 5 points is better than no points. So please do the papers and get them in on time. Also, push ahead for that 3 full pages. That's part of the discipline of writing essays in college. As your college career life progresses, I hope it does, um, you'll have maximum amount when it comes to page count. I know it sounds arbitrary. It isn't. It's a discipline. And these people you're writing about, I'm going to assign your essay for today. I've already assigned it, actually. If you look at assignments, it's on there. Um, Thousands of pages been written by these folks about these folks. So it shouldn't be that hard to come up with three. If you having trouble coming up with three, just look for another piece of information, look for another avenue, who, what, why, when, where, how. If you ever taken a journalism class, you know what I'm talking about. Um, who are they? Why are they? How did they get there? Why do we care? Why do we matter? Do we care? Add that all into the essay. And if you need an extra paragraph or two, look at another piece of information online, a little bit more of a documentary, maybe some film, some interviews. I hope you're doing that. Um, and keep pushing forward that complete 3 pages. I'll keep taking points off if they're not completely three. Uh, anyway, where am I? We're on theater this week. We'll finish it off this week. Uh, and you'll do your essay 4 next week. I'm going to start films, cinema, movies. But I'll talk about that next week. I want to just push forward and talk a little bit more about the topic for your essay number 4. If you noticed, if you've looked at it, it's different professional people that make up plays for the theater, not just playwrights, because that's probably the most important thing in a theater is to write a play. And it all starts with the writing. And then you bring in these other people, like a director. What does a director do? Well, you might have to do a little research what a director does. But you can write about a very wonderful director, Peter Brook. I got something in my eye here. Sorry. Peter Brook, who just died this week at 97. Had a wonderful life. He's a British director. Um, he was not what you call a commercial director. He was on Broadway cranking out the chorus line or Wicked or Cats or something. He believed in a theater that was totally holistic, spiritual. It's hard to explain who he is in a few minutes, but he was a revolutionary figure in the theater world. And the last many years of his life, he spent in Paris because he's a real artist and doing what we might call experimental theater, because a lot of it had to do with movement and not just another version of Death of a Salesman, something like that. And then they would perform these shows all over the world. They'd get grant money. He'd show the stuff in New York City, not mostly off Broadway. But he had a captive audience, and he was known as a phenomenon when it comes to directing and to taking text and breaking it down through not just the meaning of the words, but the movement and the scenery and the sounds and the lighting. It's all there in theater. If you saw that little documentary that opened up this week, What is Theater? It was kind of a humorous 10-minute thing. I think it was in Sydney, Australia. What is theater? Here's a blank stage. Here's a man walking across the stage. That's where it starts. Peter Brook wrote a great book. I don't expect you guys to read it, of course. It's too much. It was called The Empty Space because it all starts with an empty space. And how do you fill that space? And how do you make it interesting and where people want to sit in an audience and watch what's going on in the empty space? How do you fill the empty space? And he was, I know it sounds simple, just put people up on the stage and there you have it, but it isn't that simple. There has to be a purpose for all of it. There has to be a reason people move, talk, sit, stand. How they move and talk and stand is telling the story. It's just not the words coming out of their mouth. TV's kind of taken the most fundamentally simple element of theater, which is dialogue. And if you think about most TV series, it's all told through what the actors are speaking. That's television for the most part. In theater, you have lighting, you have movement, you have all sorts of ways to convey a story that not necessarily is the words coming out of the actor's mouth. That's why when I showed you those scenes from Hamlet, hopefully you watched them, each one was different. Everybody has a different interpretation, how their costumes should be. Should the actor be quiet? Should he be yelling? Should he be afraid? Is he contemplative? Is he suicidal? What does the lighting look like? Shakespeare has these things called soliloquies, which are essentially monologues directly spoken to the audience. They're the inner thoughts of the character, Hamlet, let's say, or King Lear, Romeo and Juliet. He has soliloquies in just about everything, mostly men. The women in Shakespeare don't usually have soliloquies. That's the way it was, folks. But they have powerful moments nonetheless. But just recently, Glenda Jackson, the famous British actress who's 83 or 84 years old, just did King Lear in New York. She played King Lear. That's a part written for a man, but she translated it beautifully. So that way, people have changed over the hundreds of years since Shakespeare's time, when the theater was a male-driven operation. In fact, it was against the law for a while for women to even be on the stage in England. Folks, that's how it works. Not in Europe, but in England. So men played women's parts. Romeo and Juliet, Lady Macbeth was played by a man until that all changed. If you watch the little documentary on Shakespeare, you'd see that. Okay, so your essays. Oh, on the new essay that's due tonight at midnight, due tonight, p.m. If you're going to be late, I'm going to extend it for 2 more days. I'll put it on Canvas. But that doesn't mean you could take a break and relax, because instead of knocking 3 points off, I'm going to knock 5 points off. Yes, 5 points. Because you shouldn't be late. I gave you a whole week to do these things. But if you're going to be late, you're going to lose 5 points right off the bat. But that's better than 0 points. So get it in. But I want you to hand it in Canvas, not email it to me as an attachment, because it could get lost in my emails really easy. So look for that. I haven't done that yet. I'm going to do that after this. So there's that. this text. Oh, on your text, the textbook. If you look at page, I think it starts at 216. There is a small play there called "The Swan Song" by Anton Chekhov, who was a Russian writer who mostly uh, he wrote in the 19th century, folks. But his stuff is very, very modern. He wrote Three Sisters, The Cherry Orchard, Uncle Vanya. I think I mentioned him in another lecture. Well, there's a short play there. Read it if you can, and tell me what you think, or at least look at it. Um, what do you think? Was it totally torturous to read? Do you understand it? Do you understand what he's trying to get at? And then there's a little key there with some questions. Simply like, for example, it says, "What happens in the drama?" It's pretty simple, right? Well, what happens? Try to answer those questions. What does happen? It's only 4 pages long. It won't take you long to read through it. Um, who changes, meaning which character changes in what way? The key to a great drama, any drama, television, movies, opera, stage plays, is a character, not all the characters, but usually the main character, protagonist, needs to change. That's usually kind of built into the success of a good character driven play. And how does this character, who changes in that play? Can you answer that real quick? I could make that as quiz, but I'm not going to. Um, what ideas are important to the drama? What's going on? He's given a lot of thought to that play. What are the ideas he's trying to bat around now? Yes, he's writing in Russian. It's a translation, but we're no different than Russia. We have the same wants, desires, dreams, hopes, loss. We fall in love. We fall out of love. We have death. We have tragedies. That's why it's relatable. It's universal. Anyway, that's on page 219. There's some questions there. Just look at them after you read it. Don't cheat and look at them first, because then you'll be looking for the answers. But the fun part is to read it and then look at that and see if you grasp any of it. I could make it a discussion thing, but I'm not going to. I would maybe if we were in class and we break up in groups and talk about it. We're not in a class to do that. It's too hard for me to break into discussion groups on these online things. It's too complicated because a lot of y'all don't have high speed internet. A lot of you don't have Zoom. A lot of you don't have, maybe you're doing watching this whole thing on your cell phone, your smartphone. So it's not as uh, practical as if we're in a room together. But so look at that. Tell me what you think. Also, further in that chapter 8, there's a bit on musicals. Check it out. They talk about Chorus Line and Stephen Sondheim, who is one of the people I want to think about writing about an essay for. Stephen Sondheim, who just died this year at 90, I think it was 91. He had a long career. He wrote some of the most incredibly complicated music in the history of musical theater, like Sweeney Todd, um, Into the Woods, Sunday in the Park with George, so many more. Uh, maybe I'll post something, an expert on Sweeney Todd. Johnny Depp played it in the movie. It's not too good. I saw the play. It's really incredible. When I lived in LA, Stephen Sondheim was a rarity. He wrote the lyrics and the musical score. Someone else would write the book. He did movie play called Company, which is up until recently running on Broadway. Follies. His heyday was the '70s, that's for sure. But then as he got older, he shared his knowledge and his genius with everybody. Um, he came on the scene by writing the lyrics to play West Side Story. The music is incredible, written by Leonard Bernstein. They collaborated, and he wrote the lyrics. And then later on, he wrote the music and the lyrics to "Funny Thing on Happened on the Ways on the Forum." Funny thing happened on the way to the Forum, um, and he was off and running. He's one person you can write about. Maybe you've seen they've made a couple of his complicated stage plays in the movies. Maybe you've seen it. Maybe you like musicals. Tell me, write about them. Write about him. Uh, so what I chose instead of just a bunch of playwrights, I've chosen other professionals in the theater that make the theater function. So he would be under composers. Under writers, I have a couple. Lorraine Hansberry, who I mentioned earlier, won the Pulitzer Prize for her first play, Raised in the Sun. African American playwright, was writing in the late '50s about racial relationships. When the civil rights movement hadn't happened yet, it's about a black family that's kind of successful. They get a little money and they buy a house in a white neighborhood, and how it disrupts their family and the white people they're moving into next door. Uh, it was very early on. Sidney Poitier, the great actor who just died this last year, was one of the guys who starred in it. They made it into a wonderful movie. Um, Sydney is fierce in it. Lorraine died very young, 34 years old. She was writing another play, and she got cancer and died before, at the very early '60s. She was just getting going. So she's this revolutionary figure that changed, first African American, first woman to win those high awards and have such a success. And she laid the groundwork for people like, if you saw that documentary, I had you look at on Susan Laurie Parks, who's still writing out there. Maybe you saw that clip of her play Top Dog, Underdog. She is definitely riding on the shoulders of Lorraine, and she's a playwright. Um, Tennessee Williams is another playwright I want guys to think about writing about. Tennessee Williams wrote in a lyrical fashion, autobiographical fashion. His most famous plays would be Streetcar Named Desire. Maybe you've heard of it. He did so many Ellers, Night of the Iguana, Fugitive Kind. He was not such a closeted, but he was in a closet for a while, homosexual, who alcoholic, drug addict. And in the 1940s, he wrote The Glass Menagerie. Maybe you've heard of it. Uh, it was a big success. And then after that, Streetcar Named Desire, and that was a revolution. And in that revolution, we discovered Marlon Brando, the actor. So I have Brando in there, somebody you can write about. And if you look at my notes, it'll say Brando, the stage actor. I don't necessarily want you guys to write about Brando in the movies. Yes, he did a lot of great movies and a lot of lame movies later on when he got unhealthy and really fat. But his early days in the theater with plays like Streetcar Named Desire, nobody had ever seen anything like it. He was, once again, he revolutionized how we look at actors using what they call the method acting, which is a sense memory type of acting, meaning you remember the pain or sorrow or the love in your own life and you put it in the character's life. You don't you do your best not to fake it. Yes, it's all fake, folks. It's a fiction, but you want to get to close as reality as you possibly can. Uh, That's why I talked about Eugene O'Neill the other day. He changed playwriting by writing these plays like Long Day's Journey into Night, Desire in the Elms, Iceman Cometh, and he took naturalism, natural behavior, realistic, I guess you'd call it behavior. Up until then, 19th, 17th century, 19th century, 18th century, it was very heightened. The acting was very broad. Uh, and so it was good for Shakespeare, not so good if you want to do a small, intimate play with intimate characters. He started doing that, and everybody followed suit. There'd be no any playwrights existing now without standing on Eugene O'Neill's shoulders. Tennessee Williams for sure. And then we have choreographers. I put choreographers in there because they're important to the musical theater, which is hugely important to stage plays, especially commercial product on Broadway. Um, Bob Fosse is up there with Stephen Sondheim and Tennessee Williams as a genius in his field. Um, he also directed movies later on, won Academy Award for movies, Cabaret. Um, but he started off as a choreographer of plays like Jam Game, Damn Yankees, and then he did Sweet Charity. He directed the movie also. Um, and the dancing, nobody ever seen dancing like this before. He created a whole other dance form. He was so prolific, and his dance is so identifiable. As soon as you see it, you know Bob Fosse directed it, the dance, and you don't even need to know about other great dance choreographers, and there's a lot of them. Balanchine and others. But Bob Fosse is at the top of the heap when it comes to originality, artistic endeavor, visionary. He was a womanizer, was never faithful to his wife, chain smoker, drug taker, and died early. I think at 58 or 59 of a heart attack. He pushed himself to the limits of his physicality, and he paid the price for it. He died in the late 80s. So there's Bob Fosse. What else do I have there? Lorraine, Fosse, Williams, Sondheim. Oh, Shakespeare. Might as well start with the granddaddy of all. Write about William Shakespeare. I showed you that documentary. I hope you watched it. Learn about Shakespeare. Why are we still performing his plays 450, 500 years after his death? Because he spoke about our commonality. He spoke about who we are. He was writing about his times in the Renaissance in the 1550s or thereabouts. Here we are in the 2000, wherever, 20s. And we're still doing Shakespeare. I told you they did 3 versions of Hamlet this year alone. It never stops. People are reinterpreting because people are finding new evidence of our humanity, in his writing. That's how deep it was. Shakespeare is the granddaddy of all playwrights. Some say he's the greatest living, not living playwright, but playwright that ever existed. That could be. Why not? Um, and I didn't assign this one, but I want to talk a little bit because it's in the book about Samuel Beckett. Samuel Beckett was an Irishman who mostly wrote in French for some reason. And he wrote absurdist, almost experimental theater. He's mostly famous for they called Waiting for Godot, um, and so many more. He also wrote short stories. Uh, the playwright if you looked in my lecture, I had a lecture. I typed it up the other day. It's in pages, by the way. I talk about my passions with plays and with playwrights, and Sam Shepard, who died about 3 years ago, who was an actor also. He was in The Right Stuff and Black Hawk Down, but he was a playwright. He literally wrote 60 plays, a lot of it in experimental style. His main influence was Samuel Beckett. Then later on, Shepard was writing in more realistic, natural style like True West, Buried Child, Curse of the Starving Class. Beckett lived in that world. Some of his plays are really deeply disturbing and dark to watch, but if you watch, I saw production in Ashland many years ago of Waiting for Godot, and it was riveting. Uh, it's hard to explain. It's just about two guys in the middle of nowhere. They look like hobos, and they're waiting for this person. You don't know why. You don't know if the person's ever going to come, and they're just having this absurdist conversation. And essentially, it deals with the existential question: why do we exist? What's out there? Just a big nothing? These guys are in the void. Are they dead? Are they in purgatory? Is it a real place that exists? Doesn't matter. It's what they're talking about and the questions that proposes that makes it so genius and connective to who we are as human beings in a very indirect way. He's not speaking directly. He's doing it in this roundabout, absurdist way, but that's how he got his message across. Samuel Beckett, uh, I will hopefully I can find a little documentary and interview or something with him. I'll post it. Hope you guys watch it. Um, he's not on the list to write about it, but if you want to write about him, go ahead. It'd be great. And that's all I got. That's who you're going to write about. Essay 4 is in the hopper. It's been assigned. Look for this lecture next in modules. I'll announce it on Canvas. I'm going to add 2 more days to the due date on your paper. Keep up on your journals, and look. I'll be posting the next day or two some more videos on modules dealing with these people here and other things, avenues. And look at your textbook. Read chapter 8. I'm skimming over a lot of that stuff, but you should read it because that's what I'm following the text. And next up is movies. That'll be next week. We don't have to deal with it yet. So enjoy the weekend. Stay cool. Pray for no fires because it's fire season, folks. And enjoy the research on these papers. Hopefully, you're not dreading it. This is the beautiful thing about education is learning about things you don't know and surprise yourself and learn about it and go deep. Someone had written a paper on literature, a couple of you did, about somebody you never read before. And in your paper you said, I think I'm going to read one of their books. Excellent. Maybe you'll read one of their plays. Maybe you'll seek out one of these plays. You can watch them. They're on YouTube, folks. We should go experience live theater. We have it in Reading, the Reading Riverfront down there on Pine Street. Maybe been to a production down there. They got the Axiom Theater out in Enterprise out there. There is some live theater event. Have you been to one? Do you ever participate in them? Shasta College puts on plays too in the big, beautiful theater they have there. Maybe you've seen something there. Maybe you've been in something. Keep pursuing it. Because, like Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage. We are just players. And with that, keep up the good work. We're on the downhill stretch of this class. See you next time.